Hello, I'm Ed Wright, Director of the Arizona Center for Judaic Studies at the University of Arizona. Welcome to another installment of our interviews of people who have played important roles in the history of the Arizona Center for Judaic Studies. This year we are celebrating the 70th anniversary of Judaic Studies courses being offered at the university. They started back in 1949 when Rabbi Albert Bilgray began teaching a Hebrew class and one other Judaic Studies class, Introduction to Judaism. It has now evolved into a program with 7 core faculty, 17 affiliated faculty, an extensive lectureship series, and a lot of opportunities for our students to do internships, to go to Israel, to study abroad, to work at archaeological excavations. And we want to take this opportunity to talk to and hear from some people who have played important roles in the history of our center. Today, we get the opportunity to speak with Professor Jennie Ebeling, an associate professor at the University of Evansville in Indiana. She is also the co-director of the Jezreel expedition in Israel. Judaic Studies is a co-sponsor of that excavation. Professor Ebeling earned her PhD in Near Eastern archaeology at the University of Arizona in 2001. She has received several research fellowships, a Fulbright Fellowship, a National Endowment for the Humanities Fellowship, and the Lady Davis Trust Fellowship to support her research in Israel and Jordan. Professor Ebeling's research interests include ancient food and drink technology, women in Canaan and ancient Israel, religion and cult in the Bronze and Iron Age. In addition to several scholarly articles, she has authored, edited, or co-edited several books, including New Approaches to Old Stones, Recent Studies of Ground Stone Artifacts, Women's Lives in Biblical Times, and Household Archaeology in Ancient Israel and Beyond. She is also a co-editor of a successful textbook entitled The Old Testament in Archaeology and History. Ebeling has also produced several films based on her ethnographic research of traditional bread ovens in Jordan. One of those films is on permanent exhibit in the Eretz Israel Museum in Tel Aviv. Ebeling served as vice president of membership of the American Schools of Oriental Research, the premier scholarly organization for people working in the ancient Near East. There, she has been a trustee for 10 years. In recognition of her long term of service to ASOR, the American Schools of Oriental Research, she was awarded the Charles Harris Service Award in 2013. Ebeling teaches a variety of courses in Near Eastern archaeology at the University of Evansville, and her excellence in undergraduate education has been recognized with 2 important awards. First, the Dean's Teaching Award in 2011, and the university's highest award, the Outstanding Teacher of the Year Award in 2014. Professor Ebeling, welcome back to Tucson and the University of Arizona.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're delighted that you're here. We're, as people who watched you go through your academic program here, we were, really blessed to be able to watch you develop as a teacher and a scholar. And everyone here is very proud of all you've accomplished.
Thank you.
And you bring great pride and a great reputation to the university for what you've done.
Thanks.
I'd like to ask you, what brought you to the University of Arizona in the first place to go to graduate school in archaeology here?
Professor Bill Deaver brought me here.
Okay.
So when I graduated from college, I went to Rutgers University and I majored in anthropology and religion. I was looking in my senior year for graduate programs in Near Eastern archaeology. And there aren't very many, and there weren't very many then. So I knew about Professor Deaver's work. I had already spent time in Israel as an undergraduate at the University of Haifa for a semester. I did an undergraduate honors thesis that involved some research into his work at Gezer. I visited the site when I was a student. And so I knew of him and I knew of his work. And I was really, really fortunate to be able to come here and study with him.
What is it about his work that captured your interest?
He is extremely prolific, and his fieldwork at Gezer is, very, very well respected, and it's an amazing site. And I was probably as an undergraduate student, I really appreciated his ability to interpret the past for a general audience. So, as an undergraduate student, I could understand his writing. And so he was more accessible scholar, I guess, than some others. So that was something
accessible. What do you mean? How is he accessible?
Well, he just has a way of bringing the past to life. And so, I knew of his scholarly work as well as some of his more popular books, and I'd seen him in programs on cable at that time. I think in the 1990s. He was a popular sort of talking head in these programs, and so I was familiar with him that way. And so he just seemed like potentially a very good fit and an excellent potential mentor.
What was the atmosphere like as a graduate student in his program, in terms of both interacting with him in the classroom and with your colleagues?
It was terrific. It's like a family. As I guess graduate programs are supposed to be. So I had made a very many good friends through the program who were graduate students alongside me, and also in the anthropology program and the classics programs here. And taking classes with all of them and the different professors in these departments was a great experience. And then, of course, every class that I took with Professor Deaver was terrific. Fun,
give me an example of one of the classes that really, if you remember something from a class that really stands out to you.
I can't remember anything that I can probably speak to today specifically, but I just do remember the tone of the seminars, where everyone was really encouraged to be part of the discussion and made to feel, they were valued, and they were, their insights were important.
So would you say, even though as a graduate student, he made you feel like a colleague in some way?
Yes, I think that's just right.
So he engaged you in the process.
Yes.
And that's part of the important way of training a graduate student so that they become leaders in the field. Yeah. What kind of extracurricular activities did you do as a student while you were here?
Mostly I was working to save up money to go to Israel in the summers and dig at first. So I was fortunate to be able to work for the Middle East Studies Association and the Center for Middle East Studies while I was here. I had a lot of friends from outside of Arizona come visit during my few years here in Tucson. So going exploring with them was great. I just spending time with my friends here and just sort of trying to get through it, I think, were my extracurricular activities.
That's a full-time job.
Yeah.
You mentioned trying to save up funds to go into the field. Did you feel, or were you receiving support from the department or from the university anyway to enable you to do the kind of things to round out your education?
Yeah, certainly the greatest supporters were coming from Judaic Studies in terms of funding to get me to Israel in the summers to work on excavations and also pay for my Hebrew language study. So I also was able to receive some funding from the department and also from the school in other ways, and then other outside grants from ASOR and other organizations, and eventually, in my fourth year of Fulbright, which took me to Israel for a year.
You now are in the position that Professor Deaver was for you. You're in that position for your students. Is that something you now carry on in dealing with your students, trying to get them engaged in say, your dig?
Absolutely.
And how many students do you have that you take into the field?
Typically in a season, my own undergraduate archaeology students and alumni, 15 to 20, and then a number of other 20 to 30 other people come in a season. We have a really large undergraduate archaeology program at the University of Evansville, and it's been a real pleasure to be able to actually take them and train them, hands-on in Israel over the last 7 years.
It has to be an enormous weight on your shoulders, co-directing a dig with Norma Franklin. Describe some of the mundane things that you didn't know you'd have to do that all of a sudden you learned that you had to do when you got in the field.
That's a really long list. Maintaining the stock of toilet paper, that would be one of them. Dealing with, guests and visitors and crises and everything non-archaeological you can imagine that could happen on a program abroad, basically. So, the archaeology is, of course, the reason why we're there, but ultimately it's a lot of the other daily life things that occupy my time in the field.
That's an area that has a lot of political problems. Has that, interfered in your work in any way, or have you had your students have to deal with any of that kind of those problems?
Not so much. I mean, I have students who are fairly intrepid, and I mean, there are some parents who are concerned at first if they want to travel to Israel, and I've also taken students to Jordan. So I do talk to some of them and reassure them. And then my partner, Norma Franklin, has been living in Israel for many years and is a tour guide and has a lot of experience working on excavations with students from overseas. So between the two of us and the rest of our staff, we're usually able to put their minds at ease. We've also been really active on social media, getting pictures and stories of the students up the same day. So by the time they wake up, 7, 8 hours, time with the time distance, they've already, can check in and see what their students have done that day in the field. So that's been really reassuring to them, I think.
How do you inspire students to become interested in archaeology today?
I teach a new course now, in a general education course that's sort of a great discoveries class to non-majors. And I think just what's been most interesting about that and trying to, get them to consider taking more courses in archaeology or even consider double majoring or majoring in archaeology, which a few of them have, is talking about the role of archaeology just generally today and archaeology in the media and how announcements about great discoveries are made and who controls the message and those sorts of things. Also archaeology and pop culture, because that's ultimately where a lot of them are learning anything about the past is through popular culture, through media, movies, TV, what they see online. So I need to engage them with that and talk about, what they think they know about the past, from these things they're being bombarded with in the media.
That doesn't necessarily come down in the most informed manner.
No.
So you studied under someone who's acknowledged as an outstanding professor and an internationally acclaimed scholar. What did you learn from Professor Deaver and others that you now use in your own work, both as a university professor and as an archaeologist in the field?
Yeah. Well, I think being accessible to students is something that I learned here. I mean, I found coming to the University of Arizona to be very different from my undergraduate experiences, where, professors would have a couple of office hours a week. And if you miss those office hours, you missed your opportunity to ever see those people. Whereas here, there was very much literally an open door policy. And I felt that there were lots of faculty and teaching assistants and others who were available, all the time. So I think that accessibility really made an impression on me. And I try to keep to that today and have a real open door policy.
So in your department, are there people who have that other model that are just strict, a couple hours here, a couple hours there? Or?
Not so much in my department. I mean, certainly in my area, yes. But my department has we have a great working relationship with the faculty in my department. So we're all like that. We're also all archaeologists. So we're very much used to working with people and, teams and in difficult situations and close quarters. So I think that also creates that kind of... So
when you're in the field, you're doing all this interaction on a, dawn to dusk type of, and beyond type of situation, that actually works to create a certain kind of esprit de corps in your department back at the university.
Definitely. So, I mean, certainly I've gotten to know my students much better working with them in the field, and living with them that way. And I think that translates back to the, day to day.
What do you enjoy most about your work, both at the university and in the field?
I enjoy getting able to watch students develop. I mean, that's been the most interesting part of all of this, seeing them go from, 18-year-olds just entering college, some of them never having traveled anywhere before. And then, watching them grow over, 4 years at the university and then beyond that, working with them in the field when they're graduate students. So it's incredible to see how much they change and mature over that time and then become colleagues.
Sure. Oh, yeah. And as we've experienced ourselves, as I've experienced with you and with Bill. Do you have an example of something you can remember of a student who you saw really caught it and you saw the spark take off and lighted a fire in them for archaeology or just for their studies in general?
Sure. I mean, I can think of a few examples of rather quiet, introverted students who, wouldn't say much in classes, and I didn't really have a chance to get to know them on campus, but then made the leap to come to the field with me. And then, get to know them that way and have them return, year after year. I mean, they just, I see them completely transform.
One last question. What would you say was the highlight of your time here as a graduate student? Maybe one of your cherished memories or something like that you really hold dear about your time at the U of A?
I think the place. I mean, I really do have great memories of being in Tucson. So in addition to, the campus and all the relationships that I made through my classes, just being here in this setting was just really a once in a lifetime experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
Just totally different from anything I've experienced before or after. I mean, it's most similar, of course, to Israel, where I spend a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
So that must be part of the reason why I just really...
Had you spent much time in a dry environment before? You said you went to Rutgers, obviously.
No, yeah. No, so it was very different.
Okay.
But then also I started going to Israel much more often while I was a graduate student here. And so I think that was part of the appeal was the landscape and the weather.
I think when I think about your time here and now watching you as a professional, you're an example of the kind of student who comes through, has that drive and energy, and obviously the intellectual acumen to succeed, but also uses that to inspire your other students. That's why you have those teaching awards. They don't hand those out to just anybody. They only give out one a year. So that you would win that at Evansville is quite a testament. And I think I thank you for coming back and talking with us here. And I want all of you to know that this is an example, that Jennie is an example of the kind of people that we're very proud to turn out through the Arizona Center for Judaic Studies and the U of A. If you're here or if you're coming here, you'll find that you'll get that kind of attention so that you can succeed like she has. And that'll be a great success for you and a cause for great pride for us. So I want to thank you once again for coming. You gave a great lecture last night.
Thank you very much.
She's also here having given a lecture, and it was a great success. And you can watch that also on the Judaic Studies website. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.